This is my sketch I just came up with for my watercolor painting, my design. And I just came up with this by kind of going through stained glass templates, doing a Google image search, and I just kind of combined a few designs and then kind of added in my own composition. I wanted to do some irises because it's spring and I needed something with color. So anyway, that's my design, and in the next part here I'm going to show you how I'm going to transfer that design onto some watercolor paper using a light table. Okay, so I have my design, I have my watercolor paper, and I've got one of these really handy slick light tables from the art room. Ask me if you need one, I can get you one. Side up, I'm gonna tuck my sketch underneath, just like that. The papers are thick, so it's really kind of difficult to see the line drawing, but I can just make it out. I'm gonna draw extremely light because I know I don't wanna see any pencil line through my watercolor paint, which is kind of transparent. So as light a lines as I can make. If you're heavy-handed, please grab an H pencil. That will help you with this job. Okay, the couple big takeaways here is, we're going to be kind of creating this looking like a stained glass. So the more individual segments you can put in there, the better, without making it too like visually noisy. So I'm just gonna kind of enclose some of these pieces that I just need an additional line there. And I kind of just made up a couple extra segments in here, just knowing that I had to split it up for a painting like that. So like this is kind of an open shape right here. I'm just gonna close it up. And just make sure your segments or your individual shapes that make up the whole are closed shapes. Like this one here probably needs to be closed up here. And you can make it up at this point too. Don't make it too visually noisy by putting too many segments in there, but make sure you don't have any gaps. And then the other thing is, like my background over here is really quite open, so I need to kind of problem solve that. And I think what I'll do is I'm just gonna add some really basic geometric shapes back there because that kind of goes with the organic shapes that I have in the front. And I know I'm going to do like very light colors back here, and my irises are going to be pretty vibrant, and I think that'll make them pop a little bit. If I do the irises in purple, maybe I'll do the background in like some maybe light yellow values and shades and tones. So just kind of have a little bit of a plan as to how you're going to paint this, what colors are going to go where. And you can see this section right here turned out a little bit wider. It's not symmetrical to this section here. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna trim the paper. And if you need me to do that and trim it down to be a little bit smaller than a 9x12, that's all good. All right, you guys, so here's getting started. So just so you know, I'm going to use a watercolor tray that's already been used in the past. I have a bunch of old ones in the art room, and I love the ones that people have used before. And all I have to do is add water to these and they'll wake right up and I can use them again. The reason I like using an old palette is because these colors have already been a little bit mixed and they're not exactly the same color from the tube. And because like colors from the tube are really boring. So that's why I use a dirty tray. And the colors themselves are going to probably look a little bit different to you than what you've used watercolor in the past. They come in these tiny little cute little tubes. And the reason they do is because it is like a liquid paint, like acrylic paint. So it comes out as kind of like a pasty sort of texture. And the reason it does is because you're going to add a ton of water to this. So you're going to use a tiny little bit of pigment and a lot of water. So I do have watercolor brushes that are decent watercolor brushes. I also like to keep those regular brushes on hand. I actually really, really like these because they give me a lot of control with what I'm doing. So just going to wake up some of this old paint that's been sitting in here for about a year. Again, you're going to be using a lot of water, way more water than you did with acrylic painting, where you hardly used any at all. It was really basically just cleaning out your brush that you used water for. So I'm just going to add a bunch of water in there. I'm going to start with a little bit lighter color, so I'm going to add more water if I want it to be a little bit lighter, just like in the watercolor tray painting that you probably did in elementary and middle school. And now I know my irises are going to be purple. So let's talk about this first technique, wet on wet. How that happens is I'm going to just kind of wet this leaf of my iris. Just a clear brush. So I know that that is wet, but you can't see it because there's no shine on the camera. And then charging. So I've got my purple woken up. I'm also going to do maybe just a little bit of blue. I'm going to kind of try to stay in the same color family when I'm doing charging. You don't want to combine complementary colors because you're going to get a muddy mess, as you guys have probably discovered already with your color theory. Now, I'm at a tilt here. My desk is tilted, so it might just run down. So I don't want much pigment on my brush. Let's see what I can do. So that is the wet on wet technique. An artist would call that a wash. It's a really light application of watercolor paint, nice and transparent. That's a good base color, okay? The next thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is charging. Charging is when you're mixing colors directly on the paper and not necessarily like in the paint palette. So charging, hopefully this turns out, I'm going to just kind of charge in a little bit of blue on top of that purple. It's pretty saturated with water. So I'm a little bit nervous about my control right now. And there, I just made that little segment a little bit more blue than the other ones. That's charging. Lifting is, and this is a perfect example of an opportunity to lift, is I grab a little paper towel, not the most absorbent paper towel at public schools, and I just kind of dab that area just a little bit to give it a little bit of variety, not only in the color, but in the value as well. So I've got that blue violet and a little bit of a highlight there as well, just kind of building in a different look from the other ones around it. Remember, the whole goal here is to make each segment a little bit different than the one before it. I'm going to kind of stick with the same blue-violet technique. I'm going to add in just a little bit different type of blue. It's being a little stubborn and not wanting to, this old paint's not really wanting to wake up too much. So I'm going to go for the same color family. I'm not going to add yellow in there because it might be a muddy mess. It's so wet. Let's just see what I can get here. I'm going to charge in just a little bit of blue. Let me see if I can do a little bit more. Make that much different from the segment before it. Different, but also relates. You know, I'm not painting this like orange. Still kind of sticking with the same color palette. Might as well just do this one next to it. Kind of like that little spot of white right there. I'm going to kind of leave that. Okay. Do a little bit of lifting just to add a little more dimension and variety. So I'm using the same technique throughout each segment on the flower, but just in a little bit different variant of color. Maybe I might charge in even a little bit more purple on this one and make it a little bit more rich in tone. And I told you my favorite method is the lifting. There, that kind of looks nice. Okay, so glazing. I can't show you glazing right now because this is wet. So glazing would be if I were to let this dry overnight completely, then come back in and work in a different, maybe I wanted this to be a little bit more red on the red side, work in a little bit different color on top of that. So that's what glazing will be.